We just keep rolling at Soccerex Connected 100 and our Digital Transformation Day. Next up, a panel brought to you by the Liquidity team. Around now is the time for rights holders and athletes to build their own platforms and shake the handcuffs of the current content strategies. Joining us today, Thomas Uhler, CEO and co-founder of the Liquidity team, Markus Hoffel, founder of MHM Management, and leading the discussion, the one, the only, Soccerex's own Mr. Charles Wagstaff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Robin. As if by movie magic, I am in your seat as soon as you finish talking, which is fantastic. And while I don't have a voice like Rob or the amount of experience, I have managed to watch him bi-weekly for the last 3 months. So I've hoped I've picked up a few things. But today, and our second to last panel of the day, we have an extremely interesting one. A panel sort of breaking down how now it's time for clubs, federations, and even athletes to branch out and start to take full ownership of their own content, the production of it, the publishing of it, and most importantly, also the housing of it as well. So joining me today, as Rob said, we have Thomas Uhler, CEO and co-founder of Liquidity Team, and Markus Hoffel, a man with a list of roles in the sports world as long as my arm, and recently board member at Augsburg and founder of MHM Management. So gentlemen, we have a lot to go over today, and I think it's best that we get started as quickly as possible because I can see our 45 minutes ticking away. So Thomas, I think it's best place to start with ourselves. I think we look at the current sort of landscape. So let's look at the current landscape of rights holder content and platforms. What do you think at the moment are the biggest pluses for clubs in these established sort of brands and sites in a way, but most importantly, the minuses that clubs are seeing from the current setup? What are the sort of handcuffs that they're experiencing with the sort of platforms that are currently so readily available?
So, hi, glad to be here, and let's, as you say, hop right into it. So I think when we talk about the current landscape, let's briefly define what is happening today. And I think in the current content landscape and digital fan relationship landscape, as I'd like to put it, we see a world that is super centered around social media and the big social media platforms, which of course has certain advantages because these platforms manage to attract a user base at absolute unbelievable scale. I mean, in the case of Facebook, for instance, we talk literally about billions of users globally. And so sports and rights holders in general have managed to attract audiences on these social media platforms. But then you ask for the handcuffs or the downside of this approach. And I think the main downside of it is platform ownership or the lack thereof. And what I mean by this is we have rights holders who have fans and manage to attract a lot of attention, but they don't have their own platform, which in turn is the basis for a bunch of business models that are fine-tuned to the digital economy that we are moving into, or I would argue we are since a while in.
Absolutely. And Markus, I'll bring you in on this one as well. With your work with sort of clients sort of around the football world as well, have you seen from the likes of sort of your YouTube, your Twitches, your Facebooks, and recently more sort of TikTok, have you seen sort of how clubs have operated with these and their sort of pain points maybe with the current platforms and the current sort of and the current system of doing things? Have you seen any sort of handcuffs there for the clubs? You're on mute, Markus, I think. There we go. We've got you back now, I think.
Yeah, I think now it works. So first of all, hello. Yes, for sure. There are some downsides since the clubs and also the athletes are not owning the data on their social media. So the reach is big and this is a lot of advantage. But, you know, they still should think about ideas and concepts, how to own the data by themselves. I mean, first party data is the goal of the 21st century. So I think that's very important, and this is a big challenge for all the clubs. But you know, the blockchain technology for sure is a technique that gives them the opportunity.
Absolutely, and to sort of own, how important is it to own your own data in that sense? Obviously, the current platforms have a way of working, but what would be the advantages of having a full sort of omnipotent power in a way over your own data set that you could sort of, it would make it a lot more malleable, I suppose. Thomas, what do you think on that?
Well, I mean, data per se has been a big buzzword, and sometimes it's overhyped. It really depends on what can you do with the data. So what you can do once you have data, though, is really powerful. And thinking from a sports perspective, for instance, data can be used so in advertising, you use data to target advertising. And once you think about sponsorship, which is the dominant type of advertising in the sports industry, it enables entirely new digital forms of sponsorship activation from data. So more targeted, but also more personalized types of sponsorship activations that you can perform. And that, of course, depends on data, but it's even more, right? It's like cross-sell, upsell potential. That just the basic example. Many platforms are very hesitant in giving you email addresses. So once you don't have email addresses, you cannot do email marketing, which is very powerful in many respects. So there are different ways, but of course it goes even as far as like once you have data, you can analyze it, and analytics is very important. For instance, in the context of audience segmentation, which, and maybe we will touch upon this later on, but audience segmentation becomes ever more important in the digital realm, because you really need to understand profiles and preferences of your audiences to reach them, but then also to develop the monetization strategies that are really fine-tuned to these audiences.
Absolutely, and maybe that's another handcuff in itself. The fact that these platforms aren't just geared for sports and football teams and athletes; they're geared for everything. YouTube's algorithm, YouTube's sort of data reporting isn't geared to just what football teams want. So maybe that sort of personalization factor, that sort of a new centralized platform for these clubs, could make for sort of a lot more better insights, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's like Mark said, it's like the gold of the 21st century. And so the current platform owners have very little interest in sharing their data sets with you, because it's what their business model is based upon. But the question is, where does the sports industry have to move and develop in the next few years to be competitive in this digital attention economy, as it's sometimes referred to?
Absolutely. And that attention economy is a word, the sort of phrase that keeps coming up more and more recently. I think it's always been there, but to have like a coined phrase. So I think for maybe those that maybe don't know, let's sort of break down that attention economy, Thomas, and say, so now there's that sort of fight for people's eyes has never been greater. When we're talking about all these platforms where clubs are now on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok in particular, with all different sorts of content, trying to build a new platform in that attention economy must be very difficult. So what would you say to sort of clubs and federations and athletes looking to go into that realm? How can you best make your chunk of the attention into your new platform?
I mean, here I'm of course, so let's go through it one by one. Is it difficult to build your own platform? If you have to start from scratch, it's definitely difficult, but I think the big advantage that the sports industry and entities in the sports industry have specifically is they don't start from scratch, because they already have the interest and the audience. It's just not on their own platform. And then of course I'm a bit partial here, because we at Liquidity Team built LT Fan Platform, which is essentially a toolkit or a builder to allow you to build your own fan platform, as we call it, which is, let's call it a social platform for your fans, where you can publish, but your fans can also interact with you in many different ways. And that is a toolkit that we specifically designed with a keen eye on the sports market. And we try to take all the technology pain away from you, that you as a rights holder can really focus on what your core competency is, and that is creating content and entertaining your audience, understanding your fan base, and engaging them in these new ways that I would argue the Gen Z and the digital native audiences, they will always connect with sports per se and the storylines in sports, the narrative of sports, but you need to present them in a different way. And that is what the social media platforms are very good at, because they brought interactivity and this social element to communication. But again, with all the limitations that I explained in the first part. But now, as based on technology like the one that we are building, it becomes increasingly easy to build your own platform, and it just becomes about the decision to say, I want to do it, and I realize that there is an inherent business value in it. And then to link back to the first part about the attention economy. So the attention economy you described it perfectly, right? There are all these platforms, there are all these entertainment options, and it's now all in one screen, right? So the internet and your screen gives you access to everything from video games, Netflix, to your favorite sports events. And how can you reach your audience, but then what business model works best for you to monetize this attention. And I think the one-size-fits-all approach that has worked super well in like the mass media age, that is coming definitely to an end because it fragments more and more the attention landscape, as I like to call it. Markus, maybe, no, you didn't, but I thought maybe you wanted to say something.
No, Thomas, I'm fully agreeing. And what you said, that the clubs are not starting from scratch, that's totally true. I mean, they also have their members where they own all the data. So when you take Bayern Munich, for example, they have like 300,000 members. So that's a big audience to start. And now it's just, you know, how to increase this group and, you know, get more and more people from your social media channels over to your own platform to really interact deeper with them. And I think the new technique gives a lot of chances for that.
Yeah, fantastic and well explained as well. So this is a sort of a new world for a lot of people. I know that the words sort of tokenization and NFTs was not in my vocabulary 6 months ago. And I think here at Soccerex, we've all had to become very well versed. I think I'm almost semi-fluent. And that's what we wanted to speak about today as well. Today, we wanted to discuss sort of having your own membership and tokenized platform. So Thomas, I know obviously it's getting close, but it's not quite a universal language, this idea of having a tokenized sort of a tokenized platform, like I said. So break down for the people at home what a tokenized platform can bring to an organization, say even outside of football, in terms of sort of engagement and strategy, and how it differs from sort of say borrowing a Twitch, for example, or borrowing a YouTube. How tokenized is it, and what can we do with it?
Yeah, I mean, let's untangle. There are two aspects: the tokenization and the borrowing angle. But let's start with the tokenization. So, of course, in the like Q1 of this year, NFTs have been all the hype in the sports industry, and that is just one type of token. So NFT, I guess, has become majorly known in the context of digital collectibles that NBA Top Shot and So Rare and many other companies build concepts for. So that is one type of token, but of course there are many more. The next, I guess most people here in the audience know Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency, but so to really easily explain what the innovation in blockchain technology and tokens is for the first time, you have digital objects that cannot be copied, but only transferred, right? So you had your music files, for instance, I could send it to you, but I still had it at the same time because it was just copied. And tokens, in essence, are these objects that I can send to you, but then I no longer have it, which is great for money, which is great for digital collectibles, but also for other cases. And another type of token that is becoming increasingly popular right now is called a social token. And that is what I would classify what we on LT Fan platform do as well, which is essentially a way to measure reputation and the relationship that you have with your fans, or that an entity has with its fans, and quantify it. And so that is a really great tool because you can build gamified experiences. Like when you jump on our platform, one way to see it in action is, for instance, the new BVB International Fans app. It's called BVB Fans Int on the app stores. You can look at it. They are built on LT Fan platform. And when you jump on there are different events like opening the app or interacting with the app in different ways that you get awarded free tokens. But so Borussia Dortmund, for instance, has a model that is totally built for sponsorship use cases, but there are also direct to consumer plays, like selling these tokens to your audience in a subscription or in packages. So and what you can do now is you can give exclusive access to the fans who have tokens, for instance, to content or for different interactive modules on the platform. And that is something where many companies in general are playing around with concepts like this. But I think what we really did by focusing on sports is fine-tuning the user experience for sports fans in that regard. So I guess what you would see in the tokenization and blockchain space in sports is more and more use cases that become more and more optimized for users out there, because we are really just at the beginning. And I believe the approach that we are taking is quite differentiated in that we give you, and now comes the second part of your question, the borrowing a platform. So we don't build a B2C product that you as a right holder jump on to promote your brand on yet another platform, but we give you the toolkit to build your own platform. So this can be likened, if you know, for instance, in e-commerce, there is something like Shopify where you can set up your own shop and they give you a lot of digital infrastructure and tools. Or if you know websites, you might have heard about Squarespace, where you can build your website. And we try to build essentially, I sometimes call it the Shopify of fan engagement. And tokens are just a way to power digital business models. So it's not the front and center, because most sports fans at least, don't really care about tokens and blockchain technology, but they care about the relationship with their club or their favorite athlete. And this can be taken into new interesting user experiences that are quite engaging, and that is what we do. But there are of course different approaches in the market as well.
Absolutely. I think, and Thomas, I know you, Marcus, sorry, I know you've worked extensively with sort of clients of yours and sort of in the industry as well around this. What would you say to those, because this is such a new thing in a lot of ways, especially when we're speaking in the football industry, which in my opinion has been notoriously slow to change, especially when things don't result on-pitch products as well. So what would you say to those maybe a little bit more wary about this topic and about things like this? I think we've seen in recent months the financial speculation, everyone's so hot on that idea now. So what would you say to those who maybe are a little bit more wary on stuff like this?
Yeah, I mean, I was very as well, you know, when I got some contracts on my table all of a sudden I haven't seen before and did not understand what it is really about. So it's a huge topic, and Thomas just explained it perfect. He explained it once to me and I got a clearer picture what kind of businesses you can do with the blockchain. And I think the biggest mistake you can currently do is to sign too exclusive contracts, too long-term, and not really knowing what you're doing, which can easily happen because you have a new contract on your table with a new technology and it's offering a lot of money and you give away exclusivity of something you're not really aware of. And I think that's the biggest mistake that's currently sometimes made. I read today that AS Roma now signed their third contract with a blockchain company. So I think they are aware of how you can really skip it and you know, really divide it into different products. And I think that this will more and more come, that we will all be aware of for what the blockchain technology can be all used for.
I mean, just to hop in here real quick, I think what is definitely always happening when you introduce new technologies, there is like one term that people talk about, but it's not really nuanced. And the same is true for all the stuff in the blockchain world. That is a big topic of mine since many years. And once we start to understand in more nuance what is what, like for instance an NFT, yes, you can use it for collectibles but there are many different other things you can do with it too. Like for instance, ticketing can also use NFT technology. So we need to develop this more precise language and then understanding. And then just like to Marcus' point, then you can also understand that if you now give an exclusive blockchain deal to anybody, that is pretty much not what you should be doing, because there are so many different nuanced use cases. And even in NFT, I would argue, right, something that is like so rare, where you can collect player cards and have a fantasy game, is fundamentally different than a moments-driven approach like NBA Top Shot and other things. So yeah, I would definitely double what Marcus just said.
Absolutely, and that sort of leads me on to my next point actually quite nicely around sort of NFTs as well. And I think you said there we had a quick call before sort of discussing the topic, and that idea of don't sign long-term deals came up. And I think in this space, it's never been more sort of prevalent. When the technology is expanding so quickly and the expectations is expanding so quickly, the idea that you're tied down to a 5-year deal when something where companies could completely surpass that deal. What would you say to sort of clubs that are sort of looking into signing exclusivity deals, maybe so they can have their hands sort of off the problem, because it's such a new thing currently, and maybe it's the expense behind it as well. So Marcus, what would you say to sort of clubs who are looking to sort of go into this world, but maybe not be too hands-on? What would you suggest? Would you suggest you should be hands-on as much as possible in this world?
Well, I mean, first of all, I probably would call an expert like Thomas and talk to him. But, and by the way, so did I. No, I think really try to understand what it's all about, and maybe if you're not sure and feel secure about what you're doing, maybe just start with some non-exclusive deals maybe not go for the first quick money, and really take your time. And I'm sure we learned so much in this first 6 months of this year. There's a lot to come in the next 6 months and after that. So just take your time, but if you want to be part of it, maybe do some on a non-exclusive basis, but don't give away exclusivity, at least not for long term. I think that's the most important advice I can give.
Yeah, and what I would add, which of course comes also to my strong belief that is reflected in the company and the product that we are building, is that you should avoid making not necessarily the same mistake that happened in the social media era or the Web 2.0 era. But back then it was maybe made sense to really rely on these platforms. But now you see that still a lot of companies try to build the same kind of business like the Facebooks and the Twitters of this generation, where they want you to be, I mean, sports is, what is it in the context of social media? Very often it's a free content provider for these platforms who then have this great advertising business model and several other ways to monetize their user base. And I think the point to avoid in this next generation of the internet evolution is to think about which business model do you need to have to be future-proof as an entity. And that is true for leagues, clubs, athletes, and there is a lot of opportunity. And because I'm very, very confident that the sports business is going to look very different in 5 and 10 years from now, in terms of how your revenue is, how it comes, how it is constituted out of different sources.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think something else that came up as well, where we were discussing the revenue split that we might see sort of change. And Marcus, obviously with your experience at sort of clubs directly, where do you sort of see that changing in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Do you see sort of more digital spend and digital revenue start to dominate those balance sheets a lot more?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the world we are in. So everything is changing from, let's say, traditional to digital, and that happens to sport and will happen more and more. We can see, small but amazing developments like, TikTok all of a sudden becomes the most famous sponsor of the Euro. The first time when they sponsored the event, by the way, and my kids are 15 and 17, and they raised up in a football family, and the last couple of years they were never interested in football anymore. They were interested in NBA and UFC, and well, actually the sports that were big on TikTok. And all of a sudden after the Euro, they are football fans again. So I think that's great, but it also shows that this is the approach to Generation Z. The only approach is digital, and that will not become less, that will become bigger and bigger. And for sure, we will find that more and more in the balance sheet, and that will have a huge impact on the business models, as it already has, but I think it's growing.
Perfect, yeah. And I think, and Thomas, coming to you on that, to speak about sort of the next platform, I think we're living in a world where the talk of blockchain, the talk of this token economy is actually quite, the best people sometimes speak about are the younger generation, who by accident and osmosis have a better understanding of it than, say, someone my age. Do you feel that sort of that is the next step for everyone's always talking about how can you get Gen Z, but before that it was how can you get millennials hooked? So what do you think, sort of this tokenization, this platform sort of solely run by the organizations, do you see that as the next sort of TikTok, the next step?
I don't know if that is the comparison that I would make, that it is the next TikTok. I think the comparison that I would make is you have to, so social media channels will always have large audiences, and they will change over time, and the better user experiences or more interesting user experiences that engage these next generations will win out. And you see a clear trend towards, of course, we saw a trend towards video, but we also saw a clear trend towards interactivity, right? Live streaming, that has become a big topic over the last, let's say, 5 years. Also really lives off the fact that it is highly interactive, and you can, for instance, jump on a chat, but you cannot only chat, but you can even pay for a super chat. So your live streamer during the live stream will read it, will interact with you. And these are new, like, social and cultural norms for an audience brought up on the internet, like the kids Marcus just referred to, and which, of course, I also know from my brother and other younger people I watch, it is really interactive. They don't accept one-way content. So, and that is something that is reflected in social media platforms. And I guess the big ones, of course, copy all the new features from startups, but also some interesting startups emerge and happen. But now the question really is, from a business and audience standpoint, what do you do with these new forms? So there are new forms, and these forms happen on social media platforms, but can you at least take one segment that is really interested in you, in your brand, whether it's a club brand, athlete brand, whatever, and get them into your own environment, give them, for instance, give them more exclusive content, give them the feeling of what I call digital proximity, to be really close, and then redefine what these social media channels are. Because right now, I would put it like this: they are, for most entities in sports, where your fan relationship lives. But that shouldn't be the case. They should be what they are, by the way, for most digital businesses, user acquisition channels, to get your audience on your own channel. And of course, you may not be able to convert 100% of your reach, especially if you are a super big brand, but a certain percentage. And let's assume you get 10% of your social media audience into your own channel, and then you have different business models from direct to consumer to sponsorship, but that can really leverage all the data, the first party data that you have, and so on and so forth. And I think there you see really interesting business opportunities emerging.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And moving back on to the NFT discussion, which seems to be my life at the moment, is going back to NFTs. And we've seen sort of the talk and the amount that they come up so much more now, and it's exploded. But an important discussion that's always come up is always that bubble that was going to burst, where the idea that a digital collectible can only go so far. And I think the key question that's always come up in my discussions sort of around the football world as well is how can we sort of elongate the fans' relationship with these digital collectibles that's beyond collecting dust as an investment in a sort of digital attic in a way. So Marcus, we'll sort of come to you. Is it all about the utility behind NFTs and what we can build there?
Yeah, and I think the worlds are merging. So gamification for sure is a big keyword. I think $2.6 billion were invested only in gaming in the first quarter of 21. So that's a huge number. I did my first investment in gaming now since I wanted to join that world. And I think it's everything is merging now. So that's very important, I think, for a club to be present in on all different levels and seeking for solutions to bring everything together. And I think the fan is not only the fan anymore. So now it's about target groups. We talked about Gen Z now. And for them, gamification and also second screen during the games is very important. So all ideas behind, or all possibilities behind the blockchain technology are very good for that as well. So you can directly interact with the club whilst you're watching a game. And I think these are the concepts of the future.
And what I would add, because definitely I think gamification plays a super important role for the next evolutionary stage of NFT. I think another aspect that we can mention there is social context around it, because if you think, especially in sport collectibles, more so than, for instance, in art, maybe in art it's really about collecting and value and value appreciation and so on. But in the context of sports, when we had like our baseball trading cards or our Panini stickers here in Europe, that it was about taking them to the schoolyard and talking with your friends about them and showing them. And this was really what made it more interesting. And now you need this social context around NFTs, which, for instance, little spoiler alert or teaser, we will do on LT Fan platform, but also other companies are building similar things. And that is going to be really, really important, because now the sports fan wants to, for instance, show to his friends the extent of his fandom, or that he has these NFTs. And then I think another important aspect is like portability of NFTs. And that is really ingrained in blockchain as a technology, because it's not only open source, but it's also built on like standardized protocols. And that makes this very easy. So one thing, for instance, we are talking about when we are currently working on our NFT solutions is, imagine you have a NFT in an application by a rights holder. So assume, for instance, Borussia Dortmund has an NFT, and this NFT entitles you to unlock some exclusive element in an environment of one of the partners. So what I like to talk about is sneaker companies, they usually have their sneaker configurators where you can design your own sneaker, and now you can get this unique design element that you can only unlock if you have an NFT. But this, you can of course think in many, many different contexts where interoperability and portability is really cool. For instance, coming back to Marcus and bringing it full circle in gaming, because imagine a club could give you like a exclusive digital merchandise that is like a skin, you know. In games like Fortnite, kids spend really a lot of money on skins for their avatar. And now imagine you can jump into this game because there is a unified standard, and you can take a jersey which you can take to your Fortnite avatar, to your FIFA My Career player, and so on. And these are the say second and maybe the last one, third generation NFT use cases that will be super exciting. And that is convergence at its best.
I think that's the most interesting looking forward. The future of it is seeing what you could do sort of cross-platform. We hear that in gaming all the time. Cross-platform is now in existence. So the idea that you can take an NFT that you own from one platform to multiple others, is that something you could see quite common as it becomes more into the lexicon, the NFT sort of world, as companies start to take a lot more notice? Do they start to accept other digital products from other realms, and almost combine powers in a way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is what the technology is built for. It's not built for having another app with a, so if the idea would be, I can have a JPEG image file in my user account, then you don't really need blockchain. Blockchain is really about creating these transferable, uncopyable objects that you can really own. Ownership wasn't brought up before, but that is also another property of them. You can own them. And that also should mean you can port them in different environments. And I would be extremely confident that we see more of this in really established digital environments as well, like the big gaming environments, for instance.
Absolutely. And I think the key point as well is what I've seen is we've seen so many types of NFTs come out, from sort of NBA Top Shots sort of highlight packages to say Real Fever's fantasy game that was that sort of in the same sort of ilk. It was announced with Bruno Fernandes this week, and how they're sort of typing into archive content and really like repurposing it in a new way. So then even to sort of athletes themselves bringing out their own ones. We saw Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski of the formerly of the New England Patriots sort of bring out their own ones, sort of unlicensed without the NFL logos and things like that. So I was keen to sort of get your opinion, Marcus, on where you see the best sort of route for NFTs now, or maybe is it completely open? What sort of product would you suggest? Or it's such an open book, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, just you mentioned just Rob Gronkowski. I think that's a pretty good example. I mean, I think he raised like $1.4 million or so with his four NFTs with the Super Bowl items. So I think, I mean, that's really an interesting story. You just mentioned also the NFL and, you know, the licensing problems behind it. But I think that's a good start for athletes to think about their own blockchain platform. I know some players are thinking about that. It also gives them the perfect, you know, they have millions of followers, some of them. And this also gives them the direct connection to their fans. And I think there are a lot of opportunities also for exchanging products, for launching exclusive products. So I think also for athletes, this is the future. So for sure your fan base have to be big enough. So I don't have a figure in mind for them at what point this starts. But I think the big football players, they all can think about that, and we will see that more and more coming. I'm not sure about some other ideas we saw. You know, one of the Brooklyn Nets players, he gave out an NFT about his contract and to get some money up front. And I don't know if that is really the future. But we already saw some crazy ideas, and there will a lot more coming up in the pretty soon future.
Absolutely. I think that was Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, from the Brooklyn Nets, who tried to...
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he did a couple of bits. I think we're seeing that more and more, though, as well, with sort of players taking percentages of their contracts into cryptocurrency instead. It's a huge gap. We were speaking about today in the office, actually. My main director is just around the corner here. It's sort of isn't as much as a believer as some, I'd say. Let's put it that way. And yeah, Thomas, for you, I think, what would you say is the sort of best mode in a way? Is it through these digital collectibles? I had a lot of chats with someone at the United States Football Federation, for example, who's looking at NFTs in quite a traditional esports sense, where he's giving them out sort of as a prize with a ticket in a way, rather than say the way that we described it together was how when you go to an NBA game, for example, you arrive with the first 10,000 people, you get a free bobblehead. Maybe that's a completely different sort of route in where it's not, it's tied into the physical world as well as the digital world. So yeah, what's your sort of opinion on where you sort of take things?
Yeah, I mean, so in my former life, I used to work as a consultant, and the best answer or the standard answer there is it depends, but sadly it is also the good answer in this case, I believe, because it depends on your goals and what you want to achieve. But so at Liquidity, from a product standpoint, we think about this the following way. We want to support very different scenarios for you as a platform owner and rights holder to achieve these goals. So, for instance, what you described is something we are going to launch in the next few weeks, which we call engagement NFTs, and that will allow you to reward your users with free NFTs, digital objects, collectibles, for certain actions they can take, which can range from doing something in your application to a bit later also doing things in the offline world. And now you can reward them with these objects. But of course, we will also support different business logics for doing everything from selling them for a fixed price to auctioning them away. And it really depends on what is the NFT, right? If the NFT gives you exclusive, so if it's a super rare NFT that allows you to for the lifetime have a free ticket in the stadium, then maybe you want to auction it away and you don't want to give it away for free. But maybe also you want to do the latter because it's really a one-time super attractive fan engagement event that you want to create and get a lot of buzz around. So there we go. But I definitely believe that understanding conceptually what NFTs can do and then applying this is just at the very beginning, and the next 1-2 years will show a lot of experimentation in this field. And from the athlete standpoint, to just briefly go back to this as well, I think the combination of having now these digital items plus doing it on your own platform is super interesting. If you think about it from, for instance, how can you build a sustainable post-career even, or do something that is sustainable post your active player career, for one. But for the second aspect is also that, of course, players today are very often at the center of the fans' attention. As you can see, for instance, Instagram follower numbers, at least the biggest stars sometimes have more followers than the clubs they play for. And if you think about it from the platform ownership angle, it opens up a whole new world of what you can do with this fandom, including you have seen a lot of developments around startups and players becoming either investors or even founding these direct-to-consumer startups. And there is a lot of potential that you can create once you think about this in a bit more strategic sense.
Yeah, just maybe to add that, Charles, so I fully agree with Thomas, but it's not only potential for the players, I think it's also the clubs will be a little bit afraid of it. The stronger the player becomes, sometimes the clubs feel they are too strong already anyway. So, but I think for the players, it's another potential to get even stronger, and the clubs have to think about that early and also step into that world very fast, so that they do not lose the power towards the players more than they already did.
Absolutely, I think
that or if you want to merge these points and this thinking, then you can even think, hey, maybe as a club it's a smart strategy to build your own strong platform, because athletes are very interested in having the audience, but maybe as a club you can almost provide like an additional service and opportunity for your players to collect fans and maybe have like additional revenue streams besides the playing contract. So maybe that is a spin that we could even see developing.
Yeah, and that brings me on quite nicely to my next point, actually, around sort of the more an athlete going out on his own and doing this sort of thing. I think we see it a lot more in American sports than European sports, beyond the Messis and the Ronaldos, is appealing outside of your own sport. And I think in the world of sort of esports and stuff, we've seen that especially. So the likes of sort of FaZe Clan going in with Man City, going in with certain athletes, Kyler Murray in the NBA. And we've seen it slightly in football with Diego Jota and his sort of FIFA esports team, and Sergio Aguero, for example. But I think the all important thing is that authenticity there. And maybe the authenticity in these new worlds while wearing a certain kit, your club kit, maybe it isn't quite there. So what's your opinion on that, Marcus, getting that authenticity maybe when trying to reach out to these new worlds, maybe outside of football?
Yeah, I think that will come anyway. I mean, it's always like in Europe, we are some years behind the development in the US. Maybe sometimes that's an advantage, but because we already have seen the first mistakes that were done over there. But yeah, for sure that will come, and the players and also the managers should maybe have a brighter look to the US, a bigger look to the US, and really bring over these ideas pretty soon. So I think it's just a question of months that we will see there much more in the European market as well.
Absolutely. And one question I had from the audience here, actually, from Philippe here. He speaks about how it used to be the case that the most engaged fans were the ones always in stadium. And I think now that we've seen that there's a change there. I know me and Thomas, we had a discussion many months ago about how we're Twitter NBA fans because we're never up to watch them, to watch the game. So a question on the marketing split there, where how do you go from not alienating those not in the know around this blockchain sort of space, but also those who are a bit more savvy as well? How would you sort of go around working between those two from a marketing perspective and not alienating either side?
Well, I mean, the first thing I guess is really focus on user experience. When, for instance, we built our product, it was super important to us that we build something that is not approachable to people who are into blockchain and blockchain fans, but something that works for sports fans, right? Who of course, digital fluent sports fans who have smartphones and use apps, but that was super important for us. And I think that is what I would give as a general advice as well, to build something that caters to your broader fan base. And then when it comes to alienating, I mean, some people, whenever you introduce something new, you will always alienate some people because people are resistant to change. But I think it's about good intentions and good communication. So I think there is no one size fits all answer to whatever people will do. But if you do something that is in general good for your fan base, gives them exciting new options, then I guess it will work. And that would be my generalized answer.
Fantastic. And I think somewhat unfairly, I'd say, we've got a question here from Alfie here. And he's speaking about how the combination of cryptocurrency in this world is maybe unfairly linked in a way, I believe. And he says here, how do you think fluctuations in cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in particular, will potentially influence the uptake of NFTs? And is there something which should concern users in the long term? For either of you, if you fancy it.
I mean, to me, it's not. So if you want to create NFTs that you can only acquire in Bitcoin, then of course that is an issue. Usually there are different workarounds, and usually for most, especially the sports-focused platforms, you can acquire them. You can acquire them also using fiat currency more or less. So the price volatility of crypto should not impact this space too much, I believe, because especially so if you want to build something successful, you cannot tie yourself too close to whatever cryptocurrency, even if it's the biggest in the world, because it's still something that has a relatively small user base. And if you want to do something that is approachable to all your fans, then you need to find workarounds for this and just accept the good old fiat currency, I guess. But of course, in some scenarios, it might be an issue, and then yeah, the volatility also reflects on NFT prices.
Absolutely, that's fascinating. And there's another question here as well, actually, from Jorge. He's talking about his core fan base in NFTs. We've kind of already answered this question, actually, and how his core fan base is a bit out of sorts for them to be looking into this world and their wants and needs. So he wants to know how you would appeal particularly to a traditional fan base, what sort of initiatives you'd use to get them involved more, without blinding them with science in a way, which I think we've a lot of people have experienced in this world. I don't know, Marcus, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, I'm not sure if we still have the typical fan base. I think we have fans. We always had fans. We always called them typical fan base. But I think now it's maybe a little bit more fragmented. There are different target groups. So there is like what we call the casual fan, who is connected to the club, who likes the club, who sometimes goes to the stadium. But then there is also the engaged fan, so the one who wants to interact with the club, who wants to stay close, who wants to have maybe moments that money can buy. And for these kind of fans, and they are all together, they are traditional fans, right? For these kind of fans, the blockchain technology is actually ideal. So I think the definition of target groups, the definition of fans needs to be, let's say, we should think about it again, what is the best way to structure it.
Absolutely, and I've just been flash red by the studio. So we've got about 30 seconds left each. Sort of closing thoughts, really. Looking into this platform idea, I think the whole idea around this topic is to discuss what is next and what's the next step and how clubs can sort of branch out and do their own thing. So, Thomas, we'll come to you for sort of your closing statement. What do you think the sort of next step is? And what do clubs need to do to make that step a reality and make the most of a new platform?
Don't be completely dependent on all these digital platform providers. Build your own digital platform and use it to establish future-proof business models. That's it. Markus.
Well, fully agree with what Thomas just said. I think the club should start with sitting down and really getting explained what can be done with this technology to really understand in how many different areas you can use it.
Fantastic, and almost spot on time. So I suggest anyone watching, if you've got questions, you don't understand this world yet, contact Thomas, contact Markus, get them involved and see what you can create. So thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you very much. We'll throw back to the studio now.
Thanks, John.